Like when you think of CrossFit, what sounds immediately come to mind?
A lot of grunting, maybe.
So what you're looking at right now is footage of a CrossFit class. You've probably heard of it, but if you haven't, CrossFit is a type of group fitness where a workout is performed by the class and is instructed by a coach, and the class usually spans about an hour. The workout involves anything from weightlifting to gymnastics movements to cardio, but it's a mix of these elements, which is what makes the workout so challenging and unpredictable. Right now the class is doing their workout, and right there you can see the coach, Seth Hunter. But if you look around, you can see that there are actually no mirrors in the gym. So how exactly do they know what they're doing if they can't see themselves? Well, part of it's by feel. If they've been doing it long enough, they'll know what feels right for the exercise, but say they're doing it wrong and they don't know what it feels like or they don't know what feels right, then that's where Seth steps in. He corrects improper movements through his coaching tips, and these are usually verbal and tactile cues, so you won't be hearing him say things like, watch your knees in the mirror or look at your reflection, see how your arm is bending, and that's actually what this piece will be focusing on, how CrossFit has set itself apart from others into its own subgroup because its experience is more verbal and tactile, as opposed to other traditional forms of exercise which are more visual. I've interviewed Seth to explore this connection, but I've also interviewed an ex-aerobics teacher who now does CrossFit, whose whole fitness was actually grounded in using mirrors. So here's some background on Seth.
Well, first started weightlifting in high school, but there wasn't a lot of instruction, so I kind of fell out of it. I just didn't want to do it anymore because it was I didn't know what I was doing. I felt like I was a lost kid in the gym and forgotten about.
It could have ended there, but Seth explains that it was actually his mom who inspired him to start CrossFit.
My mom went there and she got me into it because I played hockey, and I was 15 and a half. So that got me in there, and then I had Graham Holmberg was my trainer, so he won the CrossFit Games in 2010. So through his instruction and stuff, I kind of adhered to it, and then I saw performance gains in hockey, weight loss stuff, and I was hooked.
So early on, Seth's initial sponsors that made him begin CrossFit were his mom and Graham Holmberg, but it was others who inspired him to become a coach and a leader for others.
I think the reason I came to coach because CrossFit is Jolene. As soon as I got in here from day one, she Graham was kind of more of a lead by example kind of trainer. And I mean, it's a great thing to have someone who can do it. I'm not saying Jolene can't, but Jolene's a lot more. She's had the knowledge. She has the ex-phys background. She's done the gymnastics. She does massage therapy. She knows the body. So when she coaches, it just kind of something clicks.
What was your first experience at CrossFit like?
Oh man, we did a Tabata workout. It was the 8 rounds, 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off. We did pull-ups, push-ups, sit-ups, air squats, because the gym I went to, they had an elements class. Yeah. So you had to go through the elements class before you could start with everything else. And I was like, what is this shit? I hate Tabata. I'm never doing this again. I'm going home and I'm gonna just go to sleep.
Yeah.
And I think my legs next day, I don't think I walked right.
What was the atmosphere like? Was it completely different for you?
It was very intimidating to see these guys made out of bricks. I mean, I was just a kid, but still, even walking in here, if someone walks around, comes in our gym, I don't want it to be they're intimidated.
So Seth just mentioned a lot of important things, but one thing he said in particular was that he tries to welcome new people to CrossFit. And this really stands out because it begins to give you a picture of why CrossFit's known as its own community, why it's a kind of subgroup. It doesn't have the classic intimidation that usually comes with gyms where aesthetics are valued and judged. Instead, Seth is beginning to talk about how CrossFit is hard for everyone. Everyone suffers, and it's pretty much impossible to be completely good at it. And so Seth is extremely welcoming and kind to anyone who walks in because he understands this. And this whole idea can be linked back to mirrors because the absence of them in CrossFit represents this idea of not caring about looks and grounding itself more in strength and tactile feel. And when I asked him, Seth essentially said just that.
Mirrors, I never understood that, except I tried to justify it when I worked at Wellworks, and I literally just can't. Maybe squatting and your knees are tracking in, but that's where a good coach always sees. I remember, I still getting right leg. I kind of know enough because Julian's coached, and again, tactile cues, touch my hand if you need to drive out. So I mean, I don't think mirrors should be in here, and I'm glad I think Jolene fully agrees with that one. So that's why we don't have any. You shouldn't be looking at yourself. You shouldn't be working out. And again, why would you want to look at yourself when you're covered in dirt and sweat and blood and everything else?
And because we've established that CrossFit is more about tactile feel and sound, I asked Seth what sounds he thinks of when he thinks about CrossFit, because these make up what it essentially is, their identity.
A lot of grunting, maybe. But when I come in, like, Jolene's always yelling, no matter what the day. Not like a bad yell. She's always loud, and like it kind of has that encouraging, like she's always yelling the times, 3, 2, 1, go, and like I don't know, like that's kind of like what I think of as CrossFit. Maybe at 3, 2, 1, go, and you hear that clock ding, it like tick, tick, and then it starts, and then you're waiting to hear it again, like to end. So I mean that would probably be like the sounds that I like look forward to most. And then when the music finally kicks on.
So he mentioned at the end of that how he hears a 3, 2, 1, go, and then the music kicks on. Music is a really important part for a lot of types of fitness, but it's really important for CrossFit because CrossFit's so audio focused. And Seth keeps this in mind when he's coaching.
Depending on the movement, say we're doing like gymnastics or Olympic weightlifting, I don't want to listen to like super loud rock or like super like I don't know, like Dr. Dre, something that gets people like Eminem, like you need to have your mind clear. And then there's days where we want you to run, sprint, burpees. That's when you listen to like Metallica. That's when you listen to like NWA, something like that, just to get you going. But like I said, like days that we do like the headstands and holds, I think I had on like Sublime.
But a big part of these sounds that we haven't talked about would be the lingo of CrossFit. And while these are a big part of the sounds that make up CrossFit's identity, they're also what set it apart as its own little subgroup, and that they make up a separate language that outsiders can't understand. Seth even talks about how it's difficult to learn the lingo at first.
WOD, like what does that even mean? Yeah, like Kristen's just now starting, so she's like, what is AMRAP? Like I had AMRAP on the board the other day, and she's like, what are these words? Like, and then again, you come in, you're lost. People are speaking in like pretty much tongues, and you're like, I don't know what that means. Like, and like all these PRs, people don't even know what PR means, and like to us, that's like that's what you go for every day. So I mean, yeah, it's definitely tough to learn.
What verbal cues do you like to give?
Verbal cues? Yeah. So I have like a lot of different ones that like I got through my L1, and like just like little things, like and the things I picked up from Jolene. So I like a lot more like I'm a handsy feel like learner, so like tactile cues help me most, but verbal, like a lot of people like don't want you in their zone, but like chest up, and I always say no Pez dispenser neck. I got that from Kiri at CrossFit Grandview. And like when people have their necks cranked, I'm like, no Pez dispenser because the candy comes out of the neck, so people tuck their chin. And then I like to use like to get your shoulder blades back. Again, I struggle with this one too, so I have to constantly do it. Is like I'm gonna put a ping pong ball in between your shoulder blades, hold that in between your shoulder blades, and don't let me stop. And if someone has writing on their shirt, like I should be able to see your writing. Don't let that cave forward. And then like my other one that I got from Jolene is my favorite one. Is say your hands are full of groceries, put your car door shut with your butt, initiate that squat. That's probably my favorite one actually.
These coaching tips that Seth just gave are really important in order for the participant to do the exercises right. Listen to him for a moment coaching Kristen.
Okay, now to the bar up. Remember what we did on Monday? You go high pulls. How you pull it up and notice my elbows are high and outside. Okay, it's something I struggle with. It's called the sacrum. So to do that, add it all together. I want this barbell to trace your belly. Okay. Elbows high and outside.
So Seth just used some lingo like elbows high and outside, which would be impossible for anyone who doesn't do CrossFit to understand. And you can't see this, but Seth is showing her the exact movement as he gives this verbal cue, and he's making her repeat it over and over again. So by doing this, he's actually attaching a physical and mental picture to this phrase so that she'll remember the tip and automatically do the correct movement when she hears it. So we've already heard about why tactile and audio cues are intrinsic to CrossFit, but it doesn't really answer the question of why visual cues are so important to other forms of exercise and fitness. That's why I've interviewed Jenny about this. She's a former aerobics teacher and now does CrossFit every day.
I was an aerobics teacher for Gold's Gym, Family Fitness, and 24-Hour Fitness. There's mirrors all over the gym. There's mirrors in the group exercise room, and there's mirrors in the weight room. The music was very, very regular, and of course I gave audio cueing too. But I would say the visual was just as important as the audio.
So what did you use the mirrors for exactly?
Well, when you taught a step class, you had to teach with your back to the mirror because the choreography was so complicated. If you tried to face them, they would miss looking at your feet because your feet would be behind the step. So you use the mirror to watch what your class was doing and how well they were getting it. And a lot of times, if you saw somebody was having trouble, you would use the mirror to call them out, like, do this, or go in this direction, or go in that direction. So the entire communication from the instructor to the class was through the mirror. It wasn't like CrossFit where you actually are not really very aware of what you look like when you're actually doing the workout. CrossFit, it's all about how much you can do and how much you can lift, and it's not really very much about what you look like. Whereas in the traditional gym, it was a lot about what you look like, how thin you were. Certainly, you were fit and you had muscles, and a lot of it was about what you wore as well, and about how young you were. That's not really the case at CrossFit at all. I can see the difference between what happens in CrossFit and what happens in yoga, which I think are very close to each other, versus what happened in group exercise, which I think is different and still fun, but doesn't really reach everyone. It makes a lot of people really insecure and they leave before they ever have a chance to get used to it.
So to wrap this up, Seth has told us about a lot of ways that CrossFit is expressed through sound and touch. So while visuals are always important, sound and touch kind of take a front seat in CrossFit and let its participants actually develop a type of self-awareness. And I think this carries significance because, like Jenny mentioned, other types of fitness that involve mirrors and focus more on aesthetics can actually drive people away and maybe scare them from exercising again. And the thing about fitness types like CrossFit and yoga is that they care less about what you look like and more about how much work you put into doing that fitness. And I think that's really important to give people a way to exercise and be happier with themselves instead of just comparing themselves to others. And you can actually see this type of transformation in Seth because he recently just won the CrossFit SEO Throwdown, which is like a big competition at the local CrossFit. And so you can see that he went from being a lost kid in the gym, barely being able to do one pull-up, to now being one of the best at what he loves.